Her name is Cassie Dickson. Cassie is a Southern Highland Craft Guild heritage member, specializing in spinning, traditional weaving, and natural dyeing. As a historical pattern weaver, she has woven coverlets and linens for over 40 years. Dickson grows flax and uses 18th and 19th century tools and processes the fiber to weave linen cloth. For the past 33 years, she's also raised silkworms, processing the cocoons to silk fabric and sharing that interesting historical story. Dickson has taught and demonstrated her craft for museums, colleges, schools, guilds, and numerous regional fiber events. She's an honorary board member for the National Museum of the American Coverlet in Bedford, Pennsylvania, and she was interviewed by me for the National Museum of American History's National Woven Coverlet Project, which you can go see online. I'll plug myself there. And she has also been asked to weave a coverlet for Arlington House and Arlington National Cemetery in Arlington, Virginia. So without further ado, let's welcome to the podium Cassie Dickson, everybody. Progress, you'll just hit the arrows.
Yeah, thank you, Matt and Mike, very much for having this, and thank y'all for braving the weather and coming out. This has been a wonderful research project for me, this cotton in Appalachia, and I feel like you'll find it very interesting. I'm just going to start out by just giving some references to the introduction of cotton in America, starting in 1607, with 3 British merchant ships bringing immigrants to this country. They brought with them seeds and seedlings, including cotton seeds. Not listed in the inventory were tools, but it was pretty inferred that the tools were included on the ship because they wanted the immigrants to be successful. In 1733, General James Oglethorpe sailed from England with the purpose of founding a colony. 17 miles from the mouth of the Savannah River, he founded the city of Savannah and named the colony Georgia. Records show that the following year, Barbadance cotton was being grown by the settlers. It was a perennial, and it was a short-day flowering plant. But by 1785, it had been developed through acclimation and seed selection to an annual, day-neutral flowering plant. It was found to grow well with the rich soils and the long growing seasons on the islands of Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. There was no sea island cotton in this country until the seeds of the Glossopyrum barbadance were brought from the West Indies. Letters show that both cotton and flaxseed were brought with the settlers to Tennessee in 1780, and records also show from the shipping agent that Thomas Jefferson bought 2 species of cotton seeds, both green and black, for planting in Virginia. So, the Walker Sisters of Tennessee. With the creation of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park in 1934, hundreds of families were told that they were going to have to move out and leave the park. At that time, there were 5 unmarried Walker sisters. Nancy, one of the 6 sisters, had died in 1931, and 4 of the other siblings had already married and moved out of the park. But the 5 unmarried sisters, they refused to leave, and eventually the park commissioner and they were granted a special lifetime lease to live out their lives in the log cabin that they were raised in. For more than 40 years, they maintained their mountain homestead and carried on the traditions of the life they knew. It's an incredible story. You can read about it on the Great Smoky Mountain National Park website. There's videos of them on YouTube, and you need to go walk up and go to the cabin and see it. They just got through renovating it, actually, and worked on it. This photo was taken in 1936, and it shows Hetty, Martha, and Louisa ginning their homegrown cotton on a roller gin that their father John built. It is said that this roller gin, you could process about a pound of cotton in a day. Interesting is the fact that it was only successful with one type of cotton species. All right, and notice can you see the little white bag on the porch? behind the sisters? Well, we're going to look at those contents in just a minute. The Great Smoky Mountain National Park has 3 cotton roller gins in their collections, and the collection center is in Townsend, Tennessee. These two roller gins were built by John Walker, and this type of roller gin dates back to the 12th century or earlier, where they were seen at that time in local markets in both China and India. It takes 2 people to operate it. It's called the pinch method of fiber removal. It pinched the seed off the lint. So you need at least 2 people to turn the cranks, and each one are going in a different direction. And 1 person to feed the cotton, into the roller. You got to feed and turn. I guess it's like patting your tummy and rubbing your belly. But the Southern Highland Mountain people, the Appalachian people, were still using this type of roller gin in the 20th century to process their homegrown cotton for domestic use. 2 species of New World cotton were planted in this country. Barbadance, the characteristics are, it's a black seed, it's a smooth, and it's called free seed. It's long, staple cotton. It has silky fibers. It's known as Sea Island cotton. The seed was introduced from the West Indies and was developed through acclimation and seed selection. And this plant continued to flower and to produce cotton for as long as 6 months. The bolls were smaller and produced about half as much lint as the upland cotton. They could only grow in certain areas very well, which was on the islands. That was where they grew the best. It flowered continuously, so it had to be picked daily by hand. It was highly susceptible to the boll weevil because of its long growing season, and the smoother roller gin could de-seed this type of cotton. So the other is Glossophyllum hirsutum, and that is the short staple cotton, or fuzzy seed, and it's also called green seed. The linters grow out of the seed, and you can see it in those. You cannot pull the fibers off of those seeds. They're growing from the center of them. And it's called upland cotton. Today, it is the most widely planted species in the world. I think it's like 99% of all of our cotton is upland. Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin in 1794, and it had hooks on the rollers, and it was called a saw gin, S-A-W, and it worked with the upland cotton. And while the wire hook rollers of that gin were successful in removing the lint from the upland cotton, it tore the long silky fibers of the Sea Island species. Okay, remember the white bag of the Walker sisters' porch? Well, there are 3 bags in the Park Collection Center that belong to the Walker sisters. This bag had a label saying, "the old kind of cotton, grown in 1947. The cotton is still in locks, the seeds are black, and the lint is easily removed. The lint is fine and silky, and the fiber length is about 1 inch long. There's another bag with a tag saying spinning cotton. No seeds are present." Now, Dale Lyles, my mentor and friend, she passed away about 3 years ago, a longtime member of the Guild, and of Jim Lyles, her husband, wrote the book, The Art and Craft of Natural Dyeing. She was really into these cotton gins because of that picture of the Walker sisters. And in the 70s and 80s, she started seeing some of these little cotton roller gins in antique stores and estate sales, and got her curiosity up and started doing all the research. So Dale also analyzed. I went over to the Great Smoky Mountain Collection Center in Townsend. Dale had been there numerous times and done her research. And in the process of getting ready for this program, I went over to her son's Dale and Jim, Russell, he lives about 20 minutes away from Townsend, and went through her research, and he also has a collection of some of the gins. So Dale's did a lot of research on the seeds, even taking some of the seeds to a geneticist at the University of Georgia. The seeds did not germinate. In Dale's notes, she stated that analyzing the third bag, the cotton was still in locks with seeds. The lint was easily removed from the point of the seed, but it was more firmly attached to the rounded end. It was slightly fuzzy coat on some of the seeds, others were bare, and the lint was fine and silky, approximately 1 inch or more in length. Doris Ullman, and Anna talked a little bit about Doris. She was a very famous photographer, and she was known for the photos that she took of the people and of scenes in Appalachia. And she took these 2 photos, and it is of the women using a cotton roller gin and processing the cotton. And under this other photo, if you can't see it, it says a primitive cotton gin. Cotton is still ginned by hand in some homes of North Carolina. The machine used resembles a clothes wringer and is of the type found today in India. And I do have a note from Dale in her research that said that she interviewed a 90-year-old lady that said, well, we used a roller off of a washing machine, and you have to get it real tight, you know. So those were 2 wonderful photos that I just happened to find in doing the research. Another is the Guild had made all these posters for us as heritage members of old-time weavers and spinners, and they put it on a poster board. And I was sitting weaving one day, and I looked over. I had that poster just sitting by the loom, and I looked over and I said, whoa, what is that in that corner? And I started looking, and if you look right here, you see this is Mary Faust, and right there in the center, and she's spinning flax from a distaff. Okay, she's 98 years old, and I will tell you, on the internet it says 108 to 103, but we did an ancestry, and I found she was 98 actually. And that's her son spinning wool, but look right here. Cotton carders, cotton, and a roller gin. So it's kind of, you got to have a keen, sharp eye when you look at these old photos that you wouldn't even see it until, you know, and I went, whoa, what is that? You know, and there it was in the corner. So there'll be more on the Faust family. Okay, this is in possession of Russell and Dale. Dale found and documented from Hancock County, Tennessee. And by the way, the Faust family was from Anderson County, Tennessee, and this one in Hancock, that's Knoxville, and then it's a little north on both of those, a little to the west, but north of Knoxville in those mountain counties. So this was called the Indian churka. It was also called a worm gear roller gin. One person could operate the gin. This one is in the possession of Russell Lyle, Dale's son, and Dale documented that it was found in Hancock County, located north of Knoxville. The type of gin dates back to the 12th century India. Before Eli Whitney's invention, both types of gins, this worm gear and the smooth roller gin, were used in this country. In some homes, the Appalachian people continue to grow small amounts of cotton each year for domestic use into the 20th century. I have several references from Dale's research, how they were carding their homegrown cotton and using it for bats in their quilts. They were also knitting socks with it. And as you can see in the photo, she's laying out the carded bats of cotton for her quilt. And then another reference I told you about, a lady in her 90s. She also said that the seeds, the cotton seeds that they had, that they grew, were black. So I thought that was very interesting. Cotton yarn was readily available by 1810 in this country. It was called bunch thread. And so, I mean, it really freed the weavers and spinners. If they wanted to make a traditional coverlet, they could go buy cotton thread. They didn't have to keep, carding cotton and going through this long, laborious process. But they still grew it in some areas of Appalachia, and it continued up until 1930s and 1940s. So, two books that I found were the most wonderful in this research was Sea Island Cotton, the story of Sea Island Cotton, and Inventing the Cotton Gin. So if you want to know further research, those are two, I guess, the best. Okay, so now we'll go to flax, and let's see. Well, I don't know what I'll do with it. Okay. I just want to say that in the 1700s, we had the thousands of immigrants that were coming, the Scotch-Irish migration to this country. A lot of the Scotch-Irish settled in our Appalachian mountains. And I want to, that's a whole nother story. I could talk another hour on them. But Dale Lyles and Barbara Miller, two of our treasured members of the Guild, they have given me many antique linen textiles. And I feel like I'm a keeper of the traditions. I brought a lot of those for if you would like to look. This sheet right here that Barbara gave me, it's 200 years old. There's some embroidery of initials on one corner, but after I started really analyzing it and I was looking, it's all hand spun. It's about 40 to the inch if you're a weaver. All the seams are put together with hand spun linen thread. And then if you look very, very carefully, the initials are in hand-spun linen thread in the original weaver wove them. That are on the corner. I also have a skein of yarn that was given to me by Barbara. It's up here as well. It was spun by Sufferina Orr in the early 1800s. And I have two hand-spun linen sheets, one with the weaver's initials. But they're all very special treasures of the past that I hope one day I can pass on to somebody that loves them as much as I do. I gotta go back. Flax. Okay, those are called stricks of flax. I have some up here on the table. They're like a twisted rope. The long flax fibers are very long, and you fold it in half and you twist it to store it. Well, the old-time weavers sometimes would store the flax in the rafters of the attic. And I have some from an old home that was being torn down in Johnson City, Tennessee. And it was a bundle of flax fibers all hanging from the attic. And it's over 100 years old. But it was to keep the mice from getting into the flax. Okay. So I have grown flax for years. I have been working with linen since the 70s, and every year I try to plant a small garden, about a pound of flax seed, sometimes a little bit less, but it's a narrow plot, and it's about maybe 25 feet long, and you can see it growing in one of the pictures. And then I hang it up to dry. You pull flax a little bit early for the finest fibers. The longer it grows, it's a 3-month growing process. I plant on Good Friday, and flax can take snow and cold and frost, but I usually pull about the 3rd week of June. I start really looking to see if it's ready. But you can see how the yellow of the stalk is about a third of the way up as I start really, and I do a seed test of pressing seed onto paper towel and seeing how much oil is in the seeds to see gauging the ripeness of it. After 3 months of growing flax, and then you dry it, or you can actually red it as well. But it goes through what's called a retting process, which means a rotting of the outer bark of the plant. That's the only way you can get to the fiber. So if it's rotted for too long, you have bird nest material. You can't use it. If it's not rotted enough or retted enough, then you cannot get it off the fibers. It's stuck to them, and you can't scrape it off. It's not going to come off. You can always re-ret flax, and a lot of times I do combination retting to get different fibers. But it's a wonderful thing. All of these were dew-retted at different times of the year, so you can see the mold, when you're dew-retting, the mold and the fungus that grows on the outer bark of the plant is also coloring the flax fibers inside the plant. And so you can see the different colors. And that blonde down there, if you looked really closely at the stalks, it has little bits of mold on it because I retted it in January when it was cold and low mold, but I got blonde. If I water ret and submerge it into water, it's a bacterial reaction, and that will give you all shades of blondes. And it's kind of like a dye lot. Is what you ret at the same time, or you're going to get different colors every time you ret. You can always dye it though. Okay, then after it's properly retted, it goes to the flax break. And you break the flax off and break the boon off of the stalks, and so until you can get to the flax fibers. And it is a very laborious process, okay? I think I figured out for making that linen sheet, it would have taken me a solid month, not counting planting time, of just processing the flax, the retting, the processing, and the spinning and the weaving. It would have taken me a solid month working 8 hours a day. So I break the flax, and then it goes to the scutching board. And to scutch means to strike. This is one of those finds. I was at Western Carolina University Mountain Heritage Day, and I walked by a guy that had a bunch of antiques, and there was that scutching, and it's probably early 1800s scutching board. And I went and just put my arms around it and said, I want this. He said, what is it? And that's when you go, oh my gosh, and then I said, did anything come with it? And he said, yeah. Is that this thing? I have it. He had it labeled butter curd knife. And I went, okay. I said, I'll take that too. So, but to scutch, you put the flax over the board and you strike it. And it's knocking off the extra boon that is clinging to the flax. And then, of course, it goes to the hackles. And I have some dated 1700s, all 1800s, but that's what I use all the time. And it gives me great pleasure to know that somebody else used them 100, 200 years ago. So from the hackle, it goes to the spinning wheel, to the distaff, and the long line fibers are, when you hackle flax, the toe, the short fibers, and some of you I see are old enough to know what a toe-headed child is, a blonde head, messy hair. Well, the toe or the short fibers that stay in the tines, and the long line fibers were used for making your sheets, your clothes, things that were smooth against your body. And the toe was used for making things like toe sacks, and which are old feed sacks or something. My grandfather would call them toe sacks. And I'm sure he never knew what a toe sack the word came from. But But anyway, the tow was used for outer garments. They didn't throw anything away. They stuffed mattresses with it, cleaned gun barrels with it, and made other useful items out of it. Okay, Granny Banks. Ellie Franklin Banks, born in 1827. She died in 1920. She lived just north of here. This is from the Francis Goodrich collection. And Granny, which Marshall County is Mars Hill College. But you can see in this photo, you see her flax brake, our spinning wheel. There's a hackle right propped up by the spinning wheel right there. Yep, and if you look really carefully, there's a scutching knife right here. I have one just like that up here on the table. And I think Granny was in her 90s. This was probably, she died in 1920. I think this was taken somewhere between 1910 and 1920. And here's the Faust family again. Of Anderson County, Tennessee. So here's, I think you see the two dogs, if I get out of everybody's way, the two dogs, and Mary is spinning. Look at this right here. So she's got spinning wool. Look at this huge reel, warping reel right there. Here is a hackle with flax. Sis, her daughter, is spinning flax from a distaff. And then he's got a big flax brake right here. And behind him is the loom. And this is your scutching knife and your scutching board. So you have to, kind of look at all the little things in this. And every time I looked at it, I went, oh, there's a hackle sitting right there on that, right in front of Sis. And look at the little spool rack with all the branches stuck in there to hold the spools of yarn for reeling, making a warp for the loom. I love that photo. So this is, Lindsay Woolsey. Linen, I have this vest up here. I wove the fabric. I grew the flax and wove the fabric. And it is a linen warp with a wool weft. And that's what Lindsay Woolsey, the cloth, was. So along about in later on, when they could buy cotton yarn, some people, like Granny Banks, they kept using, growing flax and processing it and doing all this. And a lot of other people started using cotton yarn. But they changed the name. So Lindsay was, even though the name says linen, but in the mountain people would say it's Lindsay cloth. It was like everyday wear. They'd make jeans out of it and petticoats, undergarments, and it was cotton and wool. So when I went to analyze the Walker sisters' fabrics, the ones that I saw that were labeled Lindsay were not flax. So just a little tidbit of information on that, but they were considered, it's still called Lindsay. And then this is just an example of weaving that I do and hackle. I don't know what time it is. I'll be glad to answer any questions. I'll leave all my things up for you to look at if you want to, and open for questions, or we can do it during lunch. So,
everybody give Cassie a round of applause.